And each time that the planet, Nibiru, that usually was depicted as a winged disk, was on its way back to our vicinity, each time that the reappearance of Nibiru was expected, the depiction, the symbolism for Nibiru, for the planet, changed from the winged disk to the cross. So this one, for example, this is one of the most ancient ones. This is another one. This is when agriculture was granted to mankind, and so on. And if you look at the orbit of Nibiru, roughly 3,600 years, in my book, The End of Days, I explain why the orbit might have become a little shorter, only 3,450 years. But anyway, we can work with this 3,600, which is a good round number and part of the sexagesimal system. 6, 10, 60, 360, 3,600. So from the time that Nibiru was in our vicinity, making the great round around the sun, which is called the perigee, the point closest to the sun, he goes out, slows down, reaches this point, the apogee, and then starts on its way back. So at some point, the planet is here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or here, and at some point, the anticipation of its return begins. And that, I suggest, is when the sign of the cross began to reappear. In one of my books, The Wars of Gods and Men, I deal with all the various wars that took place, not only the very early ones, but in particular the ones that started to become more frequent and more ferocious as the return of Nibiru became closer and closer. It seems as if it became much more important who would be in control, who would welcome them, whose particular aspect of religion would be more predominant, etc. And it was at that time, precisely around 750 BC, that the biblical prophecies also started. They started with the prophet Amos around 750 BC. Now, in general, no distinction is made by people writing on the subject, and most of whom really don't know Hebrew, so they rely on translations. The whole thing, biblical prophecy, is taken as as one lump subject. But if you know Hebrew, and if you study the various prophecies in great detail, and know the precision of the Hebrew language, you begin to see that the prophets were really talking about two different things. One was called the day of the Lord, and Amos spoke about it. Another, I think, I quote Habakkuk, I can't see from this angle. Anyway, they started to talk about the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord is coming. The day of the Lord is near. And it was described as a time of celestial phenomena. There would be darkness at noon. You will not be able to see the stars at night. The moon will not shine its light, etc. and so on and so forth. I don't know if it's easy for you. I had about 30 slides with all these biblical quotations, but I realized that it was very difficult even for the audience to read them. So at the same time, similar prophecies known as Akkadian prophecies, Assyrian prophecies, Babylonian prophecies, began to also talk about the return, the celestial Lord would come from the south, would be first seen in this constellation, and so on. And I drew some of these charts to show you and show how you can relate some of the text to the progress of Nibiru coming back to Earth's vicinity. This is another sketch that really renders as a sketch literal wording, saying you first can see it from there, then you can see it here, and so on and so forth, as the planet returns. There were even discoveries of astronomical records. These are called astrolabes because they depict the circular heavens around Earth on plain paper with all the stars being named, where the progression of Nibiru from being seen in this part of the heavens to being seen in this part of the heavens at its apogee, its perigee, is actually recorded as having been witnessed and seen by Assyrian and Babylonian astronomers. Well, this is one of the texts accompanying one of the astrolabes. And as becomes obvious as you study all these texts, that the main feature they are talking about is a day of darkness at noon, the sun will not be seen, etc., which we can say they are really talking about the solar eclipse. And the Assyrian records, I think that's what I showed in the previous slide, talk about a darkness at noon and an eclipse at an unexpected time, because all these eclipses could be predicted. They had enough knowledge to predict solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, etc. So in exactly 556 BC, and this is a sketch, a sky map prepared by NASA, not by me, in 556, an unusual and unexpected eclipse darkness at noon took place. And it is my conclusion in the book, The End of Days, that is exactly when Nibiru last was near Earth and created that eclipse. So if you go back to the problem posed by 2012, and you say, well, 2012 is when Nibiru is expected to return and do this or do that, and be a good omen or bring harmful things, will be the apocalypse, the end. It does not work, because the last time that Nibiru was near Earth was 556 BC, and if it has an orbit of about 3,600, 3,400, 3,500 years,